One more question for Ethan. I brought my daughter to watch you work in Macbeth, and while we rarely agree on anything, we both agreed that you held the stage for 3 hours with authenticity and with brilliance and led a fine company. And I'm wondering if there was any one particular principle or philosophy that you learned from the maestro here in preparing for that role.
It's weird that I didn't include it in the movie, and he did say it tonight. But you know, the Michael Rabin story, I didn't include that, partly because we just didn't have it on camera, right? You know? But it was very powerful to me. This idea that we're all so petrified of screwing up. You know, and if you really have a respect for what you're doing, like you work at, talk about Beethoven or, and it is a recreation. What you're trying to do in some strange way is go put your finger near that light, that muse light. There's a great Sam Shepard line about why he kind of doesn't like to go to rehearsals, because then there's the implication that the author is in the room. When the playwright, he's kind of saying, I'm not sure I really am the author of these plays. That what we really are always trying to do when you're in rehearsal is get in touch with that sing. What's the fire that made that song come out, right? What's the fire that made Shakespeare write this? If I could make that visceral for you, so I'm not giving you some reheated dinner, I'm actually in the creative process right there. And the idea that this guy dropped his bow and that nobody really cared, that they don't actually care if you make a mistake or not. They care that you're engaged and that you're doing something, and that we, the people, pianists, I'm making this documentary, learning, they have this fear of memory slip, as if any of us really even know or care, or they have this fear of what hand or these things that, I was so happy that you liked your playing, but I loved it, but I also don't know what I'm talking about. I was moved. I don't apply the same scholarly energy to critiquing your playing. I was moved by it. And I ultimately feel that an emotional life combined with a discipline of practice, where those two can meet, is the same in acting as it is in piano playing. People always talk, they have this kind of fantasy, not they, the handful of people that care. There's these movies I've done with Richard Linklater, the Before trilogy, these Before Sunrise, Sunset. People love this idea that these movies are improvised and sometimes seem kind of mildly disappointed about how well rehearsed they are. You mean you rehearsed that moment when you moved her hair? Yeah, I did. But what about the time when you interrupt her? Yep. 27 takes of that. And it's creating this illusion of spontaneity. And to do that, it almost has to be spontaneous. And what Linklater would say, what he would say to Julia and I was the same thing that Sidney Lumet would say, which is the same thing that you would say, which is that you play as you practice. And it's just, and that's the way life is. How am I going to handle these big moments of my life? You're going to handle them the way you handle the small ones. And that's what, for me, the end of the movie is about. I find, watching Seymour practice and then watching him play and intercutting them is very moving to me. It's the same thing.
But you remember what you told me when you were rehearsing for Macbeth? Speaking about mentors, you told me that you were being coached by the world's greatest authorities on Shakespeare, and what it meant to you, how much you learned from them. So you became the student. You were at the top of your profession, and you became the student. So we have to be perpetual students.
Willie Nelson in his new interview for Willie Nelson is a fellow octogenarian with a new album with 9 new songs. And they were asking him, where these new songs came from, and he talks about his guitar lessons. He's been taking guitar. The guy's one of the greatest living guitar players, and he's taking lessons. And that it spawns his creativity. It's exactly what you're teaching. And so Yeah, he's mentioning Liz Smith, who's a great Shakespeare teacher here at Juilliard. She taught for years here. She was my coach, and Jack O'Brien. And these are people who are still engaged in trying to be as dangerous and playful and curious with the material as possible, not treating them sanctimoniously, engaging with them. You know, it's really exciting. So thank you for that question.